Hey guys, Angie here to break down UFC 288, Sterling versus CEJUDO for the Bantamweight strap. Thanks for coming back. My initial thoughts on this card are I'm a little bit baffled with the matchmaking in the Bantamweight division. I'm not saying this isn't an exciting matchup, but we've seen the UFC matchup, well, first it was TJ. I mean, he had a eliminator shot, and now it's CEJUDO. These are two older guys that just sort of came back into the mix, and now there's a bit of a logjam. So we've seen people maybe like Cheeto, who instead of fighting Sandhagen, he could have fought for the belt, and maybe, you know, he would have had some success there. So I feel a bit for people like Cheeto, because now that he's been kind of exposed by Sandhagen, you kind of wonder whether he'll ever get his shot now. So I'm a little bit disappointed in the UFC in that sense, that some of these, you know, fresh guys aren't coming up to get their title shot. But, you know, promotions do things for reasons, so they must know what they're doing. So, in the first fight of the card, we have KRON GRACIE. This is Charles Jourdain. KRON GRACIE, he's part of the Gracie family. He's obviously like really good at jiu-jitsu, but he hasn't really competed in jiu-jitsu, I think, since 2013 or 2017, I can't remember. But I think it's actually been something like 10 years. So clearly he's an amazing jiu-jitsu guy, but I feel like he's kind of in semi-retirement because he hasn't really been active in jiu-jitsu for that long, and also with his MMA career, he hasn't really been active for 2.5 years. So I kind of wonder whether he's like, oh, I'll give it another go now. Maybe he's been working on his striking in the meantime. His MMA record is 5-1, so all of his wins are by submission. And his loss is, that was his last fight to Cub Swanson, and that was a unanimous decision. So I don't know, I'm kind of curious to know why he had the layoff. Clearly he wants to be back. This is kind of like a novelty fight. You've got Charles Jourdain, who's more of a well-rounded guy in MMA. He's also a black belt, but probably not the same degree as Gracie. He's got a mixed bag on his record of wins and losses. He's got some submissions, but he's also been subbed as well. He's got a few TKOs on there. His only losses are submissions or decisions, so that's interesting. So I think Charles Jourdain clearly has like a striking advantage here, although he is coming off a couple of losses himself. He lost to Nathaniel Wood and Shane Burgos. So this is kind of like a novelty fight. We'll kind of put two guys together who are a little bit, you just don't know what to expect because of their, well, on Gracie's side, he has been away for a while. So it's kind of like a novelty fight against someone who has one trick to get this guy out. And Charles Jourdain, he has more ways to win, but he has had a couple of really random outcomes. Gracie's 34, Jourdain is 27. Jourdain is younger, probably got a bit more oomph, a bit more power, a bit more hunger. Gracie seems to be like, I would really love to know Gracie's agenda, like whether he's really excited to be back, like whether he's been practicing his more of his well-rounded MMA game, his striking. So it is a hard one to predict, although, yeah, because Jourdain's more well-rounded, I would give him the edge. But anything could happen in this fight. I'll probably give it to Jourdain. He'll probably win by a TKO or something like that. But I just love to know what Gracie's been doing in those 2.5 years off. Okay, second fight of the card, we have MOVSAR EVLOEV at -265 versus Bryce Mitchell at +225 in the featherweight division. MOVSAR, I know I'm saying his name wrong, he's an undefeated Russian wrestler. All his wins in the UFC have been by decision, so he's that typical sort of, I don't know if he's Dagestan or not, but he's that typical Russian wrestler, undefeated, apparently invincible. He's won his last fights are Dan Ige, Hakeem Dawodu, and Nick Lentez. Probably not the strongest of competition compared to Bryce, which is one thing to take into account. Bryce, he lost to Ilia Topuria in his last fight, and he didn't look good. But then he did claim that he had really bad flu, and like maybe other fighters would have pulled out. I do feel like he's being legit. He is that kind of person that will never give up no matter what the circumstances are, even if it's like not really going to help him out. He had a really good win against Edson Barbosa, and he's had a win against Andre Fili, which is not so bad, not a bad win to have. EVLOEV is 29 and Bryce is only 28, so Bryce is actually really young. I didn't realize how young Bryce is, because even though he's kind of he's erratic, he's a little bit of he's not erratic in a bad way. He's just a very strong personality. You can love or hate him, but he's also very mature for his age as well, but also very naive at the same time, if that makes sense. So Bryce has the height advantage, EVLOEV, he has the reach advantage, and Bryce has a leg reach advantage, if that really means much. He probably won't in this fight, because EVLOEV will probably be looking to take him down, I'm guessing. Although I wouldn't underestimate Bryce in this fight. I think that Bryce is a solid guy, even though he may not have the best striking and he seems to be lacking a little bit sometimes in that area. I think he's got the means to get this done. I'm only saying that because I feel like the odds are a little bit out of whack here. I would have it a bit closer. So that could be a fun bet to have if you believe in Bryce. I think if Bryce Mitchell was healthy in that fight against Ilia Topuria, he probably would have lost anyway. But I do think that he's a lot better than what people are giving him credit for right now. So this will be an interesting one. I've got Bryce by decision in this one. Jessica Andrade is back at it again. She last fought in February and then in January. So she is definitely packing in the fights. She's up against XIAONAN, who hasn't had the same sort of strength of schedule recently. She's had a couple of losses to Marina Rodriguez and Carla Esparza, probably fighters that she could have beaten if she had a more well-rounded game at the time. She won against Mackenzie Dern, but that was a majority decision. And I've just made a little note here that Mackenzie Dern is not the best striker. So that's probably where she was able to capitalize in that fight. So Jessica Andrade is minus 185 and XIAONAN is plus 160. So Andrade, she fought Erin Blanchfield in February, which was not last month, but 2 months ago. That was a quick turnaround before that from Lauren Murphy in January. And then she obviously submitted Amanda Lemos in that awesome standing submission. She lost to Erin Blanchfield. I think that's a lot of that has to do with the quick turnaround she had. Jessica Andrade, she's the kind of person that sometimes she doesn't show up. She's had a lot of quick turnarounds, and I find in all of those fights where she's had really quick turnarounds, she seems to not show up, just maybe because she's mentally or physically fatigued. And I think that's probably what happened with the Erin Blanchfield fight as well. But all of her wins have been against, all of her losses have been to champions apart from Blanchfield. She's been jumping around taking out contenders in flyweight and strawweight. But she might have burnout. I just think it's a little bit too soon. She's only 31, but she's a veteran. Like, she's had 30-odd fights. She's one of the best, but I kind of wonder if she's just coming... She's probably just right in her prime, but it's mainly just how busy she's been recently. I wonder whether she can really show up for this fight. But I still give her the edge just because XIAONAN hasn't really had the strongest strength of schedule. XIAONAN is 33. She's had a lot less fights, and she's had lesser competition. All of her wins in the UFC have been by decision, so she hasn't really finished anyone in the UFC. She's much higher at 5'5", but Andrade is pretty short. She has a slight reach advantage, but I don't really think that's going to be a problem in this fight. Oh yeah, especially because Andrade knows how to fight as a shorter fighter, but it's only by 1 inch. So for this fight, I think a lot of it depends on whether Jessica shows up or not. But I think that even if she isn't her best, she will have some success against XIAONAN because there's no threat of the finish there because she hasn't finished anyone in the UFC. So I'd have to go with Andrade for this fight. I reckon it'll be a TKO in the later round or it'll be a decision. Okay, the co-main. So we probably lost, in my opinion, the most exciting bout of this card, which was going to be Olivera and Dariush. That fight was supposed to happen maybe a few times and it never did. So it's a bit of a shame. Maybe it's one of those cursed fights we'll never get to see. They have rescheduled it, but I don't know. I feel a bit of doubt just because Dariush does. Anyway. So our replacement fight is Gilbert Burns versus Belal Muhammad, which probably should have happened quite a while ago. But I think the UFC didn't want to match them up together just because they're both prospects in a way, but I don't know. So Gilbert Burns is -150 and Belal is +120. I think this is the kind of fight where the odds should probably be even. Just because it's really short notice. Gilbert Burns has looked really great, but he's also having a massive quick turnaround like Andrade. I mean, he only just fought Neil Magny, and then he fought Jorge Masvidal. They've been relatively easy fights for him, but that's still a lot of mental and physical fatigue. So that's a big sort of factor with Gilbert Burns, I think, in this fight. Belal, he's a bigger guy. He's more of a true welterweight, but he's only had 2 weeks' notice as well to come into this fight. So how good will the weight cut go? He's pretty disciplined. He's just coming off Ramadan. So he probably has his weight in check, maybe. I feel like Belal's last fights have been, well, the last couple of fights, compared to Gilbert Burns, he's fought Sean Brady, which Sean Brady was meant to be the next big thing. And he is, but he beat him. Vicente Luque was also meant to be the next big thing, but he kind of had a bit of bad luck. And Stephen Thompson, who's Wonder Boy, like they're all really, really legit wins. Really impressive wins, whereas Gilbert Burns fought Jorge, Neil, they're like top 15 guys, but they're not top 5 kind of guys. Well, and Hamzat is like, okay, that's a really good fight. Even though he lost, it was a close fight. So that could be counted as a win in my opinion when I think back on that fight. That's not really a bad loss to have. I mean, that could have even been a draw, that fight. But I just think the last couple of fights that Belal has had tougher guys. And sometimes you're only as good as your last fight. And I feel like because Burns has fought like Jorge, Neil, he was easily going to win those fights, most likely. And he looked really good. But maybe because he's like been fighting lesser competition, he may have a bit more confidence than what he should. And it's easy to look good against people that aren't as vicious as, say, someone like Sean Brady. And Gilbert's last fight was the last pay-per-view that I covered here, so I don't know. I just feel like, God, Gilbert, you're crazy. He's 36, Belal's 34. I worry about that strength of schedule, the turnaround. So I am sort of leaning towards Belal, and that's why I'm confused why Gilbert Burns is the -150. I think a part of that is because Gilbert did have a lot of really great success against Usman in the title fight. Even though he didn't perform to his best, he had a lot of great success, and I think that really made him legit. But I always worry about guys that have a really good win, but then they don't continually follow up having great competition, because even though they keep their record and ranking intact and they can climb the ladder, they're not getting pushed to their limit, and that's what makes you better or keeps you better, and then your skills start to deteriorate. So that's how I'm feeling about Gilbert right now. And I've seen it, fighter fatigue happen to Andrade, even Dustin Poirier. When he fought Olivera for the title, he did not show up in that fight. He fought really bad. And I think like a lot of it was fatigue from fighting McGregor twice, and also the stagnant thing about fighting the same guy twice. And just spending like all of your time getting the perfect game plan for that type of fighter who's like really good at striking, but then you go up against Olivera, who's like a well-rounded beast. Dustin had really great game plans to fight McGregor, but then once he fought Olivera, he just fought without a game plan, it almost seemed. Anyway, back to this fight. So apart from the Magny submission, Gilbert Burns' last submission was in 2019, and I think before that it was even a wider gap. So Gilbert Burns, even though he's a great submission artist, he hasn't really used it, and that could just be because his opponents have kept it on the feet or whatever reason it is. He's a smaller welterweight. He is kind of like a tweener, but he looks good at welterweight. With that, he has a bit more speed, and he's probably a little bit quicker on the feet. However, Belal has shown really great foot movement in his last fights. Belal Muhammad, he has most wins by unanimous decision. He has no submission losses. Now, this is a very important fact. So he has no submission losses, which means I think that's due to his maybe really great takedown defense, or I'm not even sure how good his own jiu-jitsu is. He has one submission on his record to Takashi Sato. He has not been finished in 5 years, which is pretty big. His last loss was 3 years ago to Jeff Neal, and that was by a decision. Belal Muhammad is excellent at sticking to a game plan. This is what has set him apart in the welterweight division. Gilbert Burns has also shown that he has developed a very strong game plan, though. I don't know, but how much can you apply a game plan within 2 weeks? How many strategies can you come up with within 2 weeks? If you take out all that, Belal's a bigger guy. He's shown improvement in his striking, but Gilbert's still I think Gilbert might have the speed advantage and might be a bit more skilled with the striking. But then Belal has not been finished in 5 years, which shows that his defense is on par and he knows what he's doing with that. I personally think this is Belal's fight to win, mostly given the circumstances of Gilbert. Fight fatigue is a real thing. When you have quick turnarounds like this, it's okay if you're young, like 25, but 36, he's going to be worn out. It is a 5-round fight as well, which favours Belal massively, I would say. Gilbert is game though. He has the heart of a lion. Be interested to see how he performs, but I've got Belal winning this by decision or even by a stoppage in the later rounds. Alright, the main event, Aljamain Sterling versus Henry Cejudo. I think the odds are pretty even on this one. So Aljamain Sterling is an interesting champion, to say the least. So he won with a disqualification knee by Petr Yan, whilst Petr Yan was a champion, which is not a very honourable way to win. One thing I've written about Aljamain Sterling is that he's going to do whatever it takes to get success, regardless of the public perception. He will take the safe and easy route in a fight, so if he can win a fight by getting kneed, he will take that. Whereas a lot of fighters, say Anthony Smith, when he got a knee by John Jones in his title fight, he's like, nah, screw that. I'm just going to keep fighting and that's not how I'm going to win. So most fighters would have a bit more pride, let's say. But not Aljamain Sterling. He's like, yeah, sure, I'll take that. It takes balls to do that too, because you're going to get hated for that. You're not going to be respected. Then he had to rematch Petr Yan, and he won via split decision, so it was pretty close. It could have gone either way, although he did look a lot better in that fight. And then his last title defense, or his first one, it was his last one, was a TKO against TJ Dillashaw, and TJ just turned up without a shoulder, essentially. TJ pretty much screwed that up. He knew he did, and he apologized for wasting everyone's time and holding up the division, which I'm glad he said that, but still, know when your time's up. And that annoyed me greatly, because again, holding up the bantamweight division, I know that TJ Dillashaw is a very big name in the sport, and a lot of people want to see him fight, whether they love or hate him, but That just pissed me off so much. So Aljamain Sterling, he's very big for bantamweight. He's big and strong. He's a big, strong wrestler. Henry Cejudo is obviously like smaller, but he was a gold medalist in wrestling, so they're pretty on par with the wrestling. Aljamain Sterling's last loss was to Marlon Moraes by TKO 6 years ago. So that was a long time ago. Yeah, his last 3 wins lack credibility a bit. That's my main thing with Aljamain Sterling. But he has looked great, but then how do you, how do you say how good he was in that TJ Dillashaw fight when all he had to do was push him on the ground and TJ's arm popped out, and the Petr Yan one could have gone either way, and then the first Petr Yan one wasn't really a win. They need to change the rules and make it so that it's a no contest or something. But then the UFC will suffer because there's no champion. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to know how good Aljamain Sterling really is, just because his last fight was against TJ in that compromised state, and then the last 2 fights have been Petr Yan, and now he's getting someone who's another vet who's coming off a 3-year layoff, who may not really have it either, who's a smaller guy. Henry Cejudo is a natural flyweight. He is really small for bantamweight. So Aljamain Sterling's 33. He's got a really good record. He's had 22 wins and 3 losses. Aljamain Sterling is 5'7", Cejudo 5'4", so he's much shorter. Cejudo, that is. Aljamain Sterling has a significant reach advantage, and I mean significant. He has a 71-inch reach advantage, and Henry Cejudo is 64, so Henry is short and small. That really favors him in the wrestling, and that was evident, say, in the Volkanovski-Islam fight. So that could be an advantage in the wrestling for Cejudo. But he is still a lot smaller, like much smaller. And Cejudo, he's coming off a 3-year layoff. But his last 3 wins have been by TKO, and they've all been stoppages and really impressive wins. TKO of Dominic Cruz, which was a little bit of a controversial fight because I think it was an early stoppage, and Dominic did look really good in that fight. But anyway, he TKO'd Marlon Moraes, probably when Marlon Moraes was in his heyday, and a TKO win over TJ Dillashaw when TJ came down to flyweight. So TJ was not, he was compromised then as well. So even though that's a win, it's not the most impressive win because TJ sucked the life out of himself to make flyweight. So Cejudo, yeah, small for bantamweight. Yeah, so I wonder whether Cejudo will have the wrestling advantage just given his center of gravity being lower. He may have the striking to separate himself from Aljo. Aljamain Sterling's striking looked great in the last fight, but he was fighting an opponent that couldn't fight back. He's a gold medalist in wrestling at the Olympics. The biggest thing I like about Cejudo is his mind for breaking down the sport. He has an excellent mind for that, for coaching. He's had really good results from the fighters that he's coached. He comes up with excellent game plans, and he has a really great fight IQ for the sport. That's the biggest takeaway from Cejudo. I don't really pay attention to all of his other cringe shit. Same with Aljamain Sterling. I don't know why they do it, but it's just ridiculous because Cejudo is so smart. He doesn't need to do all that crap. He's listening to him. He breaks down fights so well, and you can learn so much from him because he really breaks down things technically. So he's really great to listen to when he's not being stupid. So we should just cut that out. But yeah, but this is a really hard fight to predict in a way because Cejudo's coming off that layoff, and he is 36, and Aljamain Sterling is much bigger. But I would definitely give the advantage to Cejudo because I think the wrestling's going to even itself out. So they're probably going to strike, and if they strike, Cejudo's got this guy. Yeah, I'll have to go with Cejudo by TKO finish. Yeah, so that's my pick. Yeah, so thanks so much for coming around. Yeah. Thanks for liking and subscribing and all that. So thanks so much. and see you around the traps.